Yun. Hello mga kameta. Kamusta kayo dyan? I know you had a long day. Alam ko pagod kayo. I hope guys, uh, ayan, I hope may energy pa kayo dyan. Habol ko lang to kasi hindi natin napag-usapan kahapon dahil nga sabi natin nandun tayo sa studio until gabi. Kaya may mga last minuters pa tayo na nagpapa-shoutout dyan sa mga bagong medical doctors ng Pilipinas. Of course, kasama dyan yung ating pinsan, minamahal na pinsan, talagang the best na pinsan, si Jem. Congratulations, Doktora. Yun! Kaya yun po yung konteksto kahapon. Busy tayo, hindi tayo nakahabol. Ngayon naman, tapusin ko muna, sabi ko, yung mga trabaho and all, and classes. Then go tayo. Now, of course, kahapon guys, may mga datas na lumabas na sinasabi yung Philippine economy has been moving in the right direction, at least on one front, and that's the front of economic growth. Again, malaking issue yan dahil of course, the dominant narrative as far as the Philippine economy is concerned over the past 4 or 5 months is yung issue ng inflation. Pero in fairness naman pagdating sa ating economy, guys, there are signs that the Philippines economy is moving in the right direction, at least on one front again. And this is the front of economic growth. So ito nag-defy ng Pilipinas guys yung projections, yung median projection ng mga economists and experts by growing more than 7%. So at 7.6% po yung naging growth natin, GDP growth natin in the third quarter of the year, which is way higher doon sa expectations ng mga economists. Siguro ang expectations nila was more like in the mid 6% at most. Now, mahalaga yung growth level natin dahil yung inflation po natin is at almost 8%, no? 7.7%, no? So mataas yung inflation rate natin. So it's very important that we grow fast, no? So just para lang medyo tayo dyan. Ito yung interesting both in terms of inflation and both in terms of economic growth, the Philippines defied expectations, no? Ito So, post natin to Dun sa inflation, it ended up worse than people expected. On growth, it ended up way better than people expected, no? So ito yung ito na. Unity, mga ka-Unity, kamusta kayo dyan? So, ito po yung situation natin ngayon. So, remember, yung inflation natin was at 7.7%. Now, economic growth natin is 7.6%. So, what does it mean? It means a number of things. On one hand, that means that yung growth natin ay mataas, pero hindi pa rin siya nagbibit ng ating inflation rate. Usually, you want to be able to defeat inflation by posting even higher economic growths, no? At pagdating sa Pilipinas, mukhang medyo nagle-level yung dalawa. Obviously, that provides a lot of room for spins and partisan discussion. So sa isang banda, si President Marcos a while ago, mukhang very proud siya dun sa meetings niya sa mga ASEAN leaders, ASEAN business leaders, na-emphasize niya ang Pilipinas again is once again one of the fastest growing economies in the region. So by growing at 7.6% in the third quarter of the year, no? So nag-grow tayo ng 8.2% first quarter of the year, 7.5% second quarter of the year, and 7.6%. At of course, ang consensus among many experts and analysts is that one big factor na napakataas ang growth natin recently, well, obviously, there's a base effect, so we are recovering dun sa massive economic decline na nangyari nung panahon ni Tatay. O, tignan nyo yung mga nangyari, diba? Nung 2020, grabe, diba? The other thing, of course, is meron tayong revenge shopping. Yan. Yung mga natutuwa dyan na hindi na tayo masyadong na lockdown, yung mga natutuwa na malapit na tayo sa Christmas, medyo holiday season, holiday shopping, yung mga iba na hindi nakapag-shopping na mabuti over the past 2-3 years for many reasons, either because of, concerns over, public health, over lockdowns, over economic insecurity. Ngayon, medyo nag-revenge shopping ng mga kababayan natin. Kaya this is pushing up the economic growth, no? Very, very much. No. Now, for me, yung revenge shopping na yan does not necessarily become a concern for inflation because alam natin pagdating sa inflation natin, it's supply driven rather than demand driven. What does it mean? Kasi in some situation, stable yung supply mo ng mga basic goods, but what's happening is that yung demand suddenly jumps. maybe because people have new lifestyles, new tastes. There's a massive emerging middle class. So that happens. But sometimes, and this is what has been happening over the past few months, especially in the Philippines, many developing countries, that meron shock from the supply side. No? So dahil sa increase ng prices ng basic commodities, food products, oil prices, etc., which in one way or another, all of them are related to what's happening in Ukraine and what Russia has been doing in Europe. So this is more supply-driven inflation. But at least on the demand side, we're pushing up growth. So we have a very interesting situation of demand-driven growth meeting supply-driven inflation. No, and the two are meeting each other. And interestingly, each of them have an argument to make. Kaya nga, kung nakinig kayo dun sa mga bumabanat lang sa administration, yung mga ayaw lang kay Marcos, haters lang sila, or well, they have, some basis, of course, to not like another Marcos siguro, di ba? Yung mga tao na yan, they'll always focus on the inflation numbers, no? And they'll try to keep on hammering the fact that inflation is reaching a 14-year high, and many people are hurting, which is absolutely true. Ang point ko naman is we also have to look at whether we are generating enough growth to beat the inflation on many levels. Una-una, kung mataas ang growth rate natin, that means there'll be more jobs, there'll be more job opportunities, and also room for increasing wages. So pag tinaas naman yung sahod ng mga tao, it's easier for us to cope with inflation. More than that, economic growth could also mean increase in terms of the tax collections and expansion in the tax base of government. So that means ang gobyerno magkakaroon din ng more resources para tulungan yung mga kababayan natin na pinaka-vulnerable to very slight increases. So even a percentage or two increase in prices of some basic goods could push some people down into the poverty, down the poverty line, below the poverty line. So yun yung concern natin ngayon. That's why we're watching this very carefully. Ang akin naman mga ka-meta, ang aking concern naman mga ka-meta, is that I'm not sure how sustainable this growth will be over the next 2 to 3 quarters, considering na una-una, syempre limitado yung ano natin, limitado yung cushion, diba? Like you can go revenge shopping but not forever, right? And so there's a concern about numbers of saving. There's a concern about saving rates. Uy, by the way, grabe paling sale na 11/11. Grabe yung mga sale sa Shopee, Zalora, yung mga ganun. Grabe. Tingin ka ng rubber shoes, wala ka na mahanap eh. Grabe, ubusan talaga. Daming nagsishopping. So, yun pala kasi. So, siguro, the numbers in November, hindi lang siguro, for sure, the numbers in holidays will be also pretty good. No? So, I won't be surprised we grow again at around 7 to 8% in the fourth quarter, so that our overall numbers for the entire year will be somewhere at around 7 to 7.5%, which is very much at the upper limit of the target of government of between 6.5 to 7.5%. So I'm quite optimistic about that. Yun lang, lalo yung mga Shopee, 11/11. Uy, hanggang ano pala guys? 3 hours and 46 minutes na lang guys. Wala na tayong wala nang mga 40% off dun sa mga rubber shoes, mga Ilocano style naghanap ng sale. Wala eh. Humingi na lang ako sa mga titos ko sa US, baka may mga sale doon ang dami sale eh. Ubusan talaga dito eh. Naghanap tayo ng dami ko rubber shoes na iba para sa ibang gagawin. Kasi syempre, ayaw mo naman i-pressure lang yung mga meron ka. Gusto mo i-diversify, ganyan. Tapos gusto mo feeling fuego, feeling baguettes, gusto mo yung mga colors na ayan tayo. Anyway, so one big concern is like, how sustainable is this revenge shopping? And how much of a pressure that will put on the savings rate? Kasi syempre, kailangan mo rin ng mataas ng saving rates. Kasi lalong-lalo na kung yung savings mo ay nasa bank, yun ang ginagamit ng banks to fund investors or businesses who loan from the banks. So if we have high savings, there's also a lot of room for liquidity and for borrowing for the businesses, for investors, etc. Right? So related lahat yan. So, and of course, you don't want also a situation whereby ang taas ng credit ng maraming tao, especially ngayon na tumataas yung credit and interest rates. No? So that's one thing. The other thing is the global economic picture is not as encouraging as it was, let's say, 8 months or 1 year ago. So we were hoping that lalabas na tayo dito sa pandemya, at will go towards full economic recovery and more, no, dahil nga yung isa sa nangyari sa panahon ng pandemya is yung digital economy sector natin ay nag-boom, no. So yung fintech sector ng Philippines, for instance, yung ito yung mga Grab, mga ganun, mga Gojek, these are fintech industries, no. Is booming, no, and it's expected to reach more than $40 billion in a year or two, no. So this is a very interesting development we're looking at. So we're looking at new growth drivers. President Marcos also is quite confident that he can bring a lot of investments to the Philippines. Ang dami mga pledges na naman. Tingnan natin kung ma-materialize lang. Ayan, mga ka-unity. Kamusta kayo dyan? But you see, the big concern also here is if there'll be a recession, God forbid, in the West, if there will be a recession in America and in China. So kasi ang concern lang natin the US but di China Kaya nga yung term na ginamit ni Adam Tooze, isa sa mga favorites natin economic historians, is that we have a situation of polycrisis. So we have multiple centers of crisis constantly interacting with each other. No, and ang fear natin is parang it's like an ocean with multiple whirlpools. No, it's not like one big wave, but multiple whirlpools spread across the ocean surface. No, like that's like scary, diba? And ang problema natin is China is slowing down, US is flirting with recession, although because of election spending sa November, medyo mukhang US economy is doing better than expected, and inflation may not be as bad, so let's see what the Federal Reserve will do with it. But Europe obviously is in big trouble too, right? In some sense, Europe could be in bigger trouble than China and the United States because Europe is dealing with the energy shock, no? And the winter is coming. Winter is already there, no, almost. And if the winter is going to be very cold, that's going to create a lot of problems, political problems. But at the same time, yung nangyaring yung sanctions na inimpose sa Russia and the ongoing war in Ukraine, that's putting a lot of pressure on European economists and on Europe's ability to fully recover from the pandemic. So meron kang China na sa trouble, meron kang US na flirting with recession, meron kang EU na talagang recession situation na and also dealing with an energy crisis, which the Americans don't have because they have a lot of oil and energy resources of their own. Texas pa lang, diba? So when you look at all of these three interacting together, and even if one of them pops up or if two of them pops up, that's gonna have very negative impact dito sa buong world economy. Now, in fact, there was a study by World Bank that suggested that every percentage decline in China's growth rate could result into between 0.4 to as high as 0.8% growth decline in some ASEAN countries. I think the Philippines, the numbers is closer to 0.4%. So if China's economy slows down, whatever must slow down sa China economy, almost half of that ay mamimirror sa Pilipinas. So if their economy goes down by 2% in terms of growth rates, the Philippines economic growth will go down by almost 0.8 or 4%, 0.8%, almost 1%, right? So whether you like China or not, you want China's economy to do well because interactive yon nangyaring situation dito. We are integrated into the Chinese supply chains, no? And of course, China's economy is also related to Japan, which is our also top trade investment partner, and to the United States. So all of them are related. So one goes down or two goes down, ang laking problema yan, no? So again, each side of the partisan debate has their own argument to make. I'm seeing all the unity team, mga ka-unity dyan, posting all about the 7.6% growth, super happy, super excited. Well, they forget that how growth was super low, right? In 2020, that's super like contract yung economy natin na almost 10%, among the worst on earth, no? And definitely one of the worst in Asia, along with India's. And ang point ngayon is we are recovering from that, yung nangyari sa panahon ni Tatay, but because Tatay shut down the economy excessively for far too long. We shouldn't have been dapat hindi na contract yung economy natin ng 5 quarters. Hindi dapat yung ganong kadip. I don't think that was indispensable. Anyone who says that they don't know what they're talking about or worse, alam mo na. Bloggers. So one is recovering from that, but the other thing is the inflation is also very high. So if you have a high inflation, you must beat that. So the Philippines should be growing at 8 to 10% if you have inflation of more than 5%, so that we can beat inflation, we can bring down poverty, we can create more per capita economic growth. So yun ang problema ko dun sa mga partisan debate ngayon. Each of them are overemphasizing one side while missing the bigger picture or intentionally not telling you about the bigger picture. Again, para sa akin, inflation is a big problem. The bigger problem even is that the growth is not beating inflation. Now we're coming close to that thankfully this year. But what about next year? Because base doon sa sinabi ng Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas few weeks ago, I think last week, the inflation picture for the Philippines is not good throughout 2023. The problem is the growth outlook for the Philippines may not also be as good as it has been this year. So what will be the differential, the gap between growth rates and inflation rate? Yun po yung concern natin talaga mga kameta. So eto na, pasensya na, alam ko gabi na, sabaw na kayo dyan, tapos ito, tinapon-tapon natin itong mga isyung ekonomiya. But guys, this is important kasi syempre meron itong implication sa ating lahat. And we have to base our savings, our expenditure, our investment decisions not only based on what we think is going to happen in our individual lives, but also based on what we understand about the bigger economic picture. Because ikaw, kung nasa bubble ka lang, kala mo lahat maganda or lahat pangit. But you have to understand the bigger economic picture. Because if you understand the bigger economic pictures, you can better plan about the future. You can better plan about your investment decisions or your expenditures decisions. Or ano ang gagawin mo sa holiday? Super gastos or mitigated gastos? Or revenge shopping forever. Diba? So mahalaga po yung nangyari ngayon because it has to give us mahalaga yung pagsusuri ng economic picture ngayon because yan ang dapat maging basihan natin pagdating sa ating mga decisions about our investment, about our savings, about gusto mo bumili ng third, fourth car mo dyan, gusto mo magka-jowa ng pang-apat na jowa na gusto mong dalhin sa sa Paris. Ayan na naman tayo. Ayan na naman tayo. Basta gets yun ang sinasabi ko. Yung mga, lalo na yung mga haliparot dyan. Ayan. Ingat kayo dyan sa mga gastos niya. Mga haliparot dyan. Mga gastos dyan. Wala naman, hindi naman nagpa-follow up sa world economy. Ayan. Biglang God forbid, mamaya may recession na. Akala ko mayroon pa tayong hataw pa. Diba? Ayan. Ayan. Yung mga haliparot dyan. Okay? Umayos kayo dyan. Okay? Oy, wag tama yan. Wag may magtatroll na naman sa comment section. Yun lang sinasabi ko. Huwag kayong makinig to each of the sides. Each of them partisan. Yung isa emphasize lang niya growth, yung isa emphasize lang niya inflation. Hindi naman pwede yan. Dapat makikita mo yung inflation vis-a-vis growth. Right? And also, you have to look at what the government is doing with its resources, fiscal resources, in terms of helping yung mga nahihirapan in dealing with the inflation situation. Yun po dapat ang tingnan natin. Ayan, sorry, may makakita naman tayo dito sa Twitter. Anyways, magpasalamat tayo dito sa mga supporters natin. Maraming salamat again. As usual, yung mga nagbigay ng stars and support kay Ma'am Eden Olonan, kay Mitch Tencho, kay Ma'am Jocelyn Lumberio. Ayan, thank you so much. Marami talagang mga nagmamahal sa atin. Kay Noemi Tablate, thank you so much. Salamat. Thank you also kay Ernie Carpio for joining us. Always fan natin yan. Although, nagbigay ba ng ano yan? Naman tayo. Thank you kay Des Candeza. Thank you kay V. Alina. Oh, yung iba naman dyan. Baka naman gusto niyo magbigay ng stars. Baka naman hindi. Mag-revenge shopping naman kayo dyan. Revenge star. Magbigay ng maraming stars kasi revenge shopping. Guys, tulungan natin yung ating ekonomiya. Okay? Iakyat natin yung bansa natin. Kaya magbigay kayo ng maraming stars dyan. Alright, yeah, shout out dyan kay Silves Aguilar. Ayan. Isa rin sa mga supporters natin yan. Ayan, yung mga ibang dyan, mga haliparot dyan. Okay, umayos na kayo ha. Mamaya magka-recession, God forbid. Tapos kayo, gastos sa mga jowa nyo, mga ano nyo. Umayos kayo ha. Umayos kayo yan. Ayan, diniscuss natin yan. Thank you so much. Ayan, mag-revenge shopping naman kayo ngayon. Magbigay ka ng maraming stars. Ito na, nagparinig na. Okay, gabi na. 8:30 na. Kumain na kayo dyan, magpahinga na kayo. Catch up pa tayo, God willing, tomorrow. Mag-wrap up pa tayo ng mga big news. And by the way, may mga nangyari pa sa ASEAN. We're following what's latest na happening in ASEAN. Of course, may mga interesting things happening there. Biden will be there. If not already there, actually in Phnom Penh. So, let's discuss, guys, yung mga nangyari dyan. Meron pa yung mga pag-usapan natin, balikan natin mga Senator Zubir, etc. So yun na, guys, pag-usapan pa natin ASEAN, don't worry about it. There's so much going on now. Exciting. Meron tayong mga intelligence and security and food deals also with Vietnam. So our relations with Vietnam is a little bit warmer now than panon ni tatay na purong I love China. Okay. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Talk to you soon. Hasta mañana. Adios.